All right, hello everybody. My name is Mansour. I'm with the Democratic National Committee. I wanted to welcome you to Power Blue 2020 panel on careers at the Party Committee's panel. We are welcomed here today with a group of really talented operatives who work for our party committees, folks that have been involved with the Democratic Party, in particular the committees that have been armed to help elect Democrats up and down the ballot. And so I'm really excited to not only get into the specifics of their roles in their life, but also hear about their career story and their career arc and things that they learned along the way that helped them get to where they are today. Again, my name is Mansour. I'll be your moderator today. And I'm really excited to see and hear questions from folks from our not only from our panel, but also from our audience. So I'm going to take a moment to let folks here, the panel here, introduce themselves. And I'm going to start out with, jump right into Gabrielle and give her an opportunity to introduce herself.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. And I'm so looking forward to learning about you all's travels or your trajectory, your journey. And with that, I will just introduce myself. So again, I'm Gabrielle Chu. I am the Vice President of Communications for the DLCC. In this role, I serve as the chief communications person, spokesperson, and I'm also in charge of the branding and messaging coming out of DLCC. For those of you who are not aware, the DLCC is the Democratic committee that is solely in charge of electing Democrats to the state level. So your delegates and the House of Delegates and things of that nature. And I'm looking forward to being a part of this panel, and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Gabrielle. And the DLCC has such an incredible, important role, given the importance of state legislators, the impact that they have on redistricting, and the impact that they have just in local politics. So, Gabrielle, just as a big thank you on behalf of the activists and progressives in the party. I'm going to jump over to, let's go with let's go with Alejandro, and then we can jump into the federal activity. So, Alejandro, give it to you.
Hey, everybody. Nice to meet you. Thank you for inviting me here. My name is Alejandro Chavez. I'm the political director for Democratic Municipal Officials, DMO. And we work with all the municipal officials around the country that are Democratic or identify with Democratic values. We have to be a little broad. A lot of the city councils are nonpartisan. And in some states, you can't even run with the party. So we try to identify as a Democrat and represent Democratic values. One of the great things about my job, I just started it. It's a job. I've been here about 6 weeks. So it's a new thing we're going to be building. Some of the things I'll be sharing. And I'll be honest with you, I come from a background of really great stuff. It's exciting to be a brown man in D.C. that is going to be building a political arm for a traditionally white, older organization. So I'm really fired up about that. I'll share more about that later on.
Very cool. Yes, that is really critical because you have a very unique story, Alejandro, and DMO in particular plays such a critical role in a lot of the work that Democrats do. So thank you. And I'm going to throw it over to actually my good old friend Carlos from the DCCC. Carlos.
Hello, Mansour. It's good to see you again. It's good to meet everyone. I'm very honored to be a part of this panel. Thank you for having me here. I am the Director of Diversity and Inclusion at the DCCC, which is the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, for those who might not be aware. And we do essentially what the DLCC does, but at the federal level with the House of Representatives. We are out trying to make sure that we keep the House this cycle. It's going to be very, very imperative in 2022 that we maintain our majority. We're very, very excited about it. So I'm excited to talk about the careers. I've been at the D-Trip for about 4 cycles now. So I'm excited to kind of talk about how it works here at the committees and how you can best maximize your career in politics by working at a committee. So very excited.
Amazing. And obviously the D-Trip and House Democrats played a huge role in helping pass the bipartisan infrastructure law and help usher in a series of really important legislation that impacts Americans every day, including the child tax credit. It's shots in the arms, the vaccinations, checks in the mail. So thank you, Carlos. My name is Mansour. I work for the Democratic National Committee. I am the director of special projects for the committee. I have that role is terrific. I get to do a lot of political work. I get to do a lot of coalitions work. I get to do just a lot of great work within the DNC related to supporting the White House and President Biden's agenda. I've been with the DNC for several years through the 2018 midterms and the 2020 presidential election, and I'm really excited to be part of this conversation today. So this is how we're going to do this. I think this is among really sort of critical and important sort of discussions to have, because I think part of what occurs in sort of understanding professionalism, professional career growth, personal career growth to some extent, is to understand and learn from those that have been successful and have had a path and a journey that you can learn from itself. And so I think this discussion will follow in sort of three questions is what I'm hoping that our team here can answer. One is certainly to sort of speak to your career journey, how you got started, where was sort of the first step, or how you realized your first door opening, and how that sort of career arc developed. Love to learn about personal lessons that you learned, right? Moments of growth, experiences that you had that really sort of shaped you, and they can certainly be professional, but to me they feel really personal. Moments of maybe maturity, things that you realized, maybe some self-actualization. And I think the piece of it is to also let folks know about sort of your role, day-to-day role within the organization that you play, and what that looks like, and how perhaps the experiences that you previously had have put you in a position to succeed now. And obviously, I think there's like other pieces to that, but I think that if we're able to sort of speak to those things, I feel as though we've done our part to convey the story of working for a committee to the audience itself. Does that sound reasonable to the panel? Is that something that folks are okay? Great. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to start. I like to start with the DLCC and sort of move up with the DMO and then the D-Trip. Is that reasonable? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fair.
So,
yeah.
All right, I'll throw it to you, Gabrielle.
Okay. So I'll start. Do you want to do it one question at a time, or you want me okay. So I'll start with, and I'm assuming you want to start with how I got started here. Yes. Okay. So I started actually on the official side. The bulk of my experience is actually at the federal level. I'm a proud Hampton University alumni. So I went to an HBCU, and I went to school in Congressman Bobby Scott's district of Virginia in Hampton Roads area. And so I was a student there. I have a bachelor's of my degrees in political science. And I lucked in, honestly, I think it is, I say it's luck. Mr. Scott would say it's not. But I lucked into an internship with Congressman Scott because I was in the political science department at Hampton, and we were required to do some internal intern type work. Needless to say, I impressed the congressman with my work ethic and my skills, and I was offered a full-time job, and I worked my way up from his intern to becoming his press secretary before I eventually left. And so, but while I was with the congressman, I learned a lot about Virginia and the inner works of everything that happens beyond when you're not in Congress, right? So how does all of these things build up to the point where it has to get started at point A, and how it gets to point B at Congress, and then how it makes its way to the White House? And so from there, I decided to leave Congressman Scott's office because I just wanted to have a little more experience and a little different experiences and, some other things under my belt. And I went to go work for Speaker Pelosi as her communications director on her committee, the DPCC. And I came up with, I don't know if any of you all have heard it, but the For the People messaging that the House is using. That's my little baby. And so that was something that I was really proud of. But then I left and was just like, okay, let's learn. Let's go on the campaign side. Let's get a little gritty here. And I worked for an organization that focused solely on healthcare, but I was introduced to the states level at that job. And so when I did that, that's when I learned that, oh, wow, like, there's a whole level here that plays a huge significant role outside of just the federal level. There's a whole lot, there's a level of the ballot that is basically I would say, and this might be biased, but the foundation of the Democratic Party here. And so I was just like, wow, that's crazy. That's amazing. I learned so much there. But from there, I left. I soaked in all of that information, and then I went on to be the communications director for the Congressional Black Caucus and was really fighting for the issues for the Black and brown people. And that was a great time because that job allowed me to, I'm in federal policy, obviously, but it also allowed me to tap into the communities a little more and understand the different variations of things that's happening. And so from there, I left and joined the DLCC, and I applied for that job. I'll tell all of you, I was very nervous. I'll be very transparent in that. I was very nervous to apply for the vice president of communications job there, but it was the best decision that I've ever made because in this work, here at the DLCC, we really do focus on a lot of the issues that are impacting day-to-day lives for every American. And so we work hand in hand with my colleagues who are here on this panel. We all play a pivotal role in making sure that the Democratic Party is able to provide, but not only provide, but more so deliver for the American families and hardworking families and those of us who are starting and making families, those of us who are coming out of college and making our start, those of us who are making our way into the middle class and then higher into the middle class. That is one of the things, all of those interactions and intersections intersect with the DLCC, intersect with the state legislative level of our ballot. So our House delegates and the state Senate, that's our area of the ballot. So it's been a great experience, and I love working for the DLCC. It's great. And I also just love the fact that we are more so a part of the building blocks. And the Democratic Party we're a big open tent, and that's amazing about us. And then it's just great that it gives us the opportunity to really focus on the building blocks. So if the federal level, a great example of that would be if the federal level is working on voting rights, for example, on the state level, we can say, yes, we see what you're doing. We will pick up where you all are, and we will try to shore up those things on our end, as well as redistricting, for example. We see the importance of redistricting, right? We understand that we need to create maps that are representative of the communities that we serve, and then also provide a clear roadmap for Democrats moving forward. And so we recognize the importance there, and we recognize our role in that. And so from building off of that, we can pass the torch on to our folks who are at the DNC or the DCCC to pick up the baton and then keep running. So I think that's a quick synopsis of my trajectory.
Yeah, no, I think that's terrific, and I think we do. I think everyone here agrees that the DLCC and the state ledge folks are part of the foundation of the party. So certainly I think that's recognizable and demonstrable. And I'd love to come back to you, Gabrielle. I think one of the questions actually that really that kind of strikes me, and maybe Alejandro, you can sort of dive into this, right, in terms of not only the sort of path and the journey. Is there, in your mind, when you first started out getting as an organizer, did you say, "Oh, I want to go work. I want to be the political director at DMO"? Did you have a sort of a specific role in mind that you wanted to have by X date or X time? I'm going to throw that out to you. I'd love for you to sort of address that in your personal story.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for having me. And Gabrielle, I'll just remind you that good luck is the fortune that favors the bold. Okay. Remember that.
Thank you.
Look, a little bit about me. So I was very fortunate. I grew up in the movement. My grandfather was Cesar Chavez. So from a young age, I had a grassroots experience put in me. And, it was never volunteer. We kind of had to do it, right? Like, I didn't know why we didn't eat grapes. For many years, I just didn't eat grapes. Then I got older and realized, I was like 10 and my grandfather fasted. And I saw, okay, farm workers, I get it now, right? But from like 6 to 10, I just didn't eat grapes because we just didn't do it. Right? Like, it's just certain things we didn't do. And I never really was into the campaign world. About 29, I'll be honest with you, I was bouncing at a bar, job here and there, just kind of going across. I voted, but that's really where my participation was. It was more of an activist type of thing, but mostly just I voted and went upon my life. And then I worked on an election, and it brought me to Arizona, and I'm originally from the Bay Area. So when you go from perfect weather to the desert, it is a problem. Let me tell you, it is still a problem. But I was here and I did work, and I got the organizer bug. Everyone gets bit by it. You're just kind of like, well, I'll take this gig. And then I worked on a presidential. I worked for the party on Obama in 08, and then it was healthcare, and then it was something else. And then I ran the first legislative race. Actually, it was a city council race that brought me a legislative race for Congressman Gallego. It was his first legislative race. Yeah, his first legislative race. I ran his, and then I went and worked at Move On, and I worked at I worked at Democracy for America, and I worked at Next Gen, running huge field programs. I helped pass the Iran deal, and just really wide national fields. And then I was the political director for Prop 207 to legalize recreational marijuana. So DMO, I'll be honest, I'm moving to DC in like 3 weeks. I was never like, I'm not going to go to DC. I don't need to go there. I could do all my work. I'm a field guy. I need to be out where the people are. I can't be just there, right? We all hear this. So no, I never thought I was going to do the job. But what I started to realize when I was applying, much like Gabrielle, I was nervous. Do I not have it? You notice in my time I explained, I never went to college. So I'm a high school educated. I went to a really good high school, so don't get me wrong. It was a top-notch school in the country, so it's not a very good high school. But I never thought of it as a career with the party. I never thought of it as a career. And part of it was because I was based on just, this is my lane, this is what I do. But the more I got exposed to the different realms that we all do, how Democratic municipal officials focus on municipalities, I did a lot of work with federal government, and that it's more like a puzzle that we all make this real cool democratic picture. One of the things I really try to focus on, and that's moving me, is that, have you guys all heard this? Elections has consequences. You guys heard this? Yeah, it's crap to me, because elections only have consequences if you elect Republicans. If you elect Democrats, elections have opportunity for fair wages, for equal opportunity, for fair housing, for saving the planet, for helping children, vaccine shots, and the list goes on. And so as we're doing this, and we're going to talk more, I really think that where I've started to see that was when I realized that the party and these jobs were not just one single linear, that there's many different ways they impact, from training to field, to strategy, to communications, to your municipal officials that you see every day at church, in the grocery store, people don't know this. I see my council person or my neighboring council person in pickup line at school for kids. You don't see your congressional person, right? You might see your legislative person if they're not in session, right? But for the most part, you see your city council person, they're like, hey, look, I got to get to a board meeting. We got to hurry up. I got a council meeting in 30 minutes. I got to drop you off. Let's go. So that accessibility, I think, is so key. And so as we're going to keep going, I think it's important to realize that you don't have to see yourself at the party, but there is a place for you when you're ready to make that move, especially, like I said, if you're a brown man from Arizona without a college education.
Thanks, Alejandro. Thank you so much. And Carlos, would love to for you to tell us a little bit about how you got started and your work at the D-Trip.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. So I got started in campaigns. Originally, I worked on a Senate race back in 2012. I started off as an intern back in New Mexico. I'm from Albuquerque originally. I grew up in a house where, you couldn't complain if you didn't vote. That was always like the saying, right? Like if you didn't vote, you had no right to complain about what was going on. So it was very important that you voted. I was registered to vote right away as soon as I turned 18. And it was always very important. And, I grew up in a pretty liberal household. So I always knew that, Democrats were the ones that were pushing America in a forward direction and not trying to hold us back. And especially for the candidates that I was getting involved with, Martin Heinrich at the time was the candidate for Senate, and I always thought it was refreshing to have not a lawyer running for Senate because he's an engineer. So it was I wanted to work on his race, and then I wound up working on a statewide, and I stayed in Albuquerque. I worked on a mayoral race, worked on municipal races, city council a little bit. Worked with the local Democrats for a little bit before I jumped back on another Senate race in 2014 there. But it also meant I was working with at the time Congressman Ben Ray Lujan. Now he's a senator. Then he became the chair at the DCCC, and I had been thinking about how can I help beyond just New Mexico. So when I was coming to DC, there was the opportunity to come to the DCCC. I started off as an intern, was able to get hired on. I thought I wanted to go back in the field, but what I found working at the DCCC is that there's a lot of people within the movement who are very passionate about getting people out to vote, or they're very good at fundraising and all of that, but there seemed to be kind of with a lack of like good care for those workers themselves. And so I wanted to stay at the committee. I wanted to keep working. I was in the operations department at the time, and I left and came back, and then I was working in the call time room with members of Congress, which is a very thankless job. But I was still getting along with everyone, trying to have a passion for helping everyone. And we had a moment, actually, it was in the 2020 cycle. It made a few headlines where the leadership at the time wasn't meeting the needs of the staff, especially the staff of color, especially the marginalized staff. And this was a moment when I knew it was time to start stepping up. And that's when I started entering into the diversity team and started working on bringing about a change in how we approach helping the people that work here. So I have been at the D-Trip for 4 cycles now because I was trying to make sure that we're working and creating an environment where everyone is included. We're not hiring people of color just to say we're hiring them. We're not just checking a box. And that we're hiring people that can then turn around and talk to the voters that we need to talk to at all times. That's another issue that we tend to have is we wait till the last moment to talk to certain groups of voters, especially voters of color, marginalized groups. So I'm very, very excited because at the D-Trip, we've made a huge turnaround and a real big recommitment to how we incorporate diversity, equity, inclusion, how we're treating our workers. And that is, I think, going to help us and make a huge difference because we can't lose the House. It's going to be pretty disastrous. The president needs the backup. He needs help. We're barely getting the laws passed now, and the Senate's been a huge roadblock. We have the House, and of course, we're grateful to the DLCC because we have redistricting as a huge issue, and that so I just I stayed at the D-Trip because it is just an important backstop to what we do. But that's kind of been my path to date.
Thank you, Carlos. There's actually a question that was posed in the chat, and it's actually a really good question because I think I think there is sort of not a clear understanding of the roles of the different committees, and so I think the question is, how does DMO, DLCC, the D-Trip relate to the DNC? And so I think it's Veronica Adams who asked that question in the chat. The Democratic Party has party committees, and each committee is tasked with helping support the respective set of Democrats. The D-Trip is armed with reelecting electing Democrats to Congress. The DLCC is charged with helping elect Democrats to state legislators. And the DNC is tasked and in charge to help support Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And there are specific mechanisms associated with that, know-how, best practices that help provide expertise and sort of advantages to having that structure. And so I think part of working within the party is finding your role. I was blessed in that I had an opportunity to work actually work in a campaign at almost every level of the ballot. I started in Iowa a long time ago at the Iowa caucuses, and I was lucky. It was a complete. I mean, the fact that I was in Iowa was by just sheer luck. I was there going to school to go be a computer scientist. I come from a family of engineers. I was going to go get a technical degree and graduate and go program. It was because I was in Iowa. It was because I was surrounded by the Iowa caucuses, or the activity of the Iowa caucuses, that I was able to observe and see the actual operation of organizing. I could see folks knocking on doors and having that conversation, and it was really eye-opening. It helped me understand sort of the mechanics of organizing, and that's where I think the switch flipped for me. I think what fueled it, right? It's not. I mean, it wasn't just a curiosity. What fueled it was the Iraq War, and it was a compulsion that I had in the sense that I needed to do something about this war that I knew was wrong. So, sort of understanding the mechanics, or observing the mechanics, I should say, and then sort of having a passion is what kickstarted my sort of political career. Every experience that I had thereafter was sort of the underlying thread was curiosity. I was simply curious. I was curious to get my first volunteer opportunity. I wanted to experience. I wanted to help contribute to being a door knocker in Ames, Iowa, way back in the day. I really enjoyed that experience, so I kept on doing it. I applied for a job as a field organizer. Why? Because I was like, well, I'm really good as a volunteer. I'm as good as anybody else. Let's see how this works out. Became a field organizer for the party for a congressional race out there. Was terrific. Had a great experience. Why not be a regional field director? Another experiment that I followed and tried. And those little incremental experiences accumulated. And they help strengthen my overall expertise and sensibility about what it means to be an organizer. The one piece that I will say here, right? I mean, I think there's a term for it. I think it's called a growth mindset, right? It's the approach and framework where you say to yourself, I have to continue to grow and I have to continue to learn. That I'm not the expert or master of anything just yet. And you follow your curiosity. I mean, at the time, I wasn't sort of deliberately saying this conscientiously to myself, but that's essentially what I was doing. I was like, I'm curious about this. I want to go explore this. And that curiosity helped sort of accumulate experiences and career campaigns. And so, I mean, I can certainly walk you through all the pieces, me working at the DCCC, me working on a whole bunch of like Senate campaigns and running paid canvases and all that. But I think fundamentally, if there's any one takeaway, is that I simply was curious about one thing after the other, and that helped propel me forward. And a lot of those experiences were terrible. Some of them were terrible. Some of them were really good. Some of them I don't want to relive again. But that's the whole process. That was what I learned. And I want to jump back to the panel here. But one final thought that I wanted to share before I throw it to others. And I want folks here, the panel here in particular, to touch on this. I think that in most instances, and Carlos, maybe you can sort of talk about this in particular, is there are organizers out there who have the patchwork of experiences. They've they were a field director for maybe a mayor's race or a state house race. They were a door knocker for a lieutenant governor's race. They did communications for a house campaign. What does that mean? Like, rationally, what are things that they should be asking themselves, or what would you be asking yourself if you were in their position? Would that mean that they continue doing house races? Do they continue doing state ledge races? Do they continue doing mayor's races or municipal races? How does that sort of thinking? What would be the questions they should ask themselves? I'm actually going to throw it to Carlos first, and then we'll go to Gabrielle if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. So I think it depends on how much experience I think that each person has, and it also kind of depends on where it is they're looking to get in and what they're trying to do. I think one of the cool things about a committee is it's where you start to really learn like how to specialize when it comes to doing campaign work. When you're on a campaign, you're kind of doing it all because it's so much more of a patchwork, especially when you're on a smaller race like a house race or a legislative race or a municipal race. You're doing a lot more because there's just so much less staff. And when you come to a committee, you start to understand what the different functions are and how they kind of do have their own lanes and you have their department. So if you're trying to make that jump, it's kind of recognizing maybe where you want to specialize. Have you been more excited about doing the data side of it, looking at the people, maybe look into analytics and seeing what those jobs are? If you really love organizing, getting on the national organizing levels, you get to make big decisions about where people are spending the money to hire organizers to be able to talk to people and who they're talking to. Although that can also tie back to analytics. Maybe you did go to a fundraising event, you can start off at a lower level here and work your way up quickly. That's another cool thing about the campaign world in general, but also working at a committee is you can move up quickly since everything's very cyclical and you can advance at least every 2 years. But that's really what the question is you should be asking yourself as you're thinking about this, especially about what committee, if you want to go to a committee, is where am I trying to specialize in? Am I the political person? Am I going around talking to everyone? Am I the fundraiser? Am I the operations person? So I think that's kind of what I would say going to a committee.
And I'll just jump in and just say ditto. Everything to what Carlos said. As I was listening in and writing my first initial thoughts that I wrote down were understand what expertise work do you have. So for myself, I started out as an intern and I was a legislative assistant on the Hill, and I realized quickly that while I can write bills, I don't want to write bills. I want to message about those. And so it's important to understand what are your strengths and your passions and how can those things can combine. Where can you meet and have a happy medium of those places, and then build out or strategize your career in those space from there. And then the other thing I wrote down here was becoming very nimble about what it is that you wanted to do, right? So like if you understand that you have a passion or a knack, I see some people in here saying that they like messaging. So if you really know that you have a passion for messaging and that you have a way with words and persuasion and getting people to understand what the story or the narrative behind a particular situation or topic for that matter, then you will want to go into messaging, right? Or if you know that you have a passion for dealing with people on the day-to-day basis, then you might want to go into fieldwork and organizing. But to Carlos's point, it is also the perk about working in a committee is that you do have the opportunity to become an expert in your field, but then grow quickly. And that's one thing I do love about I think it's fair to say for all of the Democratic committees, but in the Democratic Party as a whole, for the most part, you can grow. Like there is a space for just about everyone for you to come in. You might start off as an intern or start off as a field organizer, but then there's a path. You just have to figure out which path might work best for your career purposes and your goals and things like that. And then lastly, I would just say just to be laser focused on your strengths and understand what those might be. Be open to taking in new perspectives and learning different paths and learning different skill sets, and then then taking from that information and then narrowing down to what you know you will be good at. Because ultimately, it is about just being. Yes, we're all working, we're all individuals, we're all grown-ups, right? So we want to have some level of work-life balance, but you also, at the end of the day, I think everyone's goal is to enjoy what they do for a living, right? So you want to make sure that you're able to hone in on those skills and then create a path for yourself moving forward. So, I mean, Carlos really did say a lot of the basics, and then all I can do is just say ditto at this point. But yeah, that would be my two cents.
Well, Gabrielle, we're going to come back to you here in a second. I know Alejandro's going to dive into this question, but when and Alejandro, I would love for your thoughts on this is also just to walk through folks what is your day to day, right? Like what is like what I mean, like what does it mean to work for a committee? And well, first of all, I'd love to have you answer the question around some of the thinking around getting to cultivating understanding next steps for somebody looking to join the party, and then also what the day-to-day looks like.
Yeah, so I think that the biggest thing I'd add on is what also is the impact you want to make. I mean, one of the things about, look, and I'll tell you this, when I talk with candidates, when I did work with candidates, I'd have these people, they'd come to me, Alejandro, I'm going to run for Congress. I go, that's fantastic, great. Look, I want to focus on police reform. I'm like, okay, then you should run for city council, right? Like, I get what you're saying. There are people who are policy people that are more than happy and really like the idea of change that is 20 years, 5 years, 10, 15 years down the line. That works in federal. But if you want to say, hey, look, we want to pass an ordinance that goes into impact in the next year, next month, city, state, county, right? So I think that you should also look at where you want to make your biggest impact, because that passion matters. Look, I've done a lot of national work. There'd be times where I was at home in Arizona doing work, and I started getting into an argument with somebody about getting rid of cash bail. And they finally look at me and they go, Alejandro, what the hell are you talking about? And I go, cash bail. And she goes, what are you talking about? This is Arizona. Oh, right. That's work I did in California. Right. Like, and so one of the things I had also learned, or I had thought, was that I actually needed to do work at home. Like, it was important to me to do work in Arizona. I'd be off fighting for these things, and then I'd be like, damn, Arizona, man, we didn't do anything there. Upset. Or, I'd win in these other states. I'd get big wins, Senate wins, Congressional wins, City Council wins. I'd come back in Arizona legislature, lost 3 seats. God damn it, I got to live here. So I think those are important things to ask yourself. Do you want to do it nationally? I love working with 10, 15 different candidates across the country, 50. I was working with 50 at one time when I was a DFA federal candidates. I enjoy having that. That is one of my joys of this business. There are people who just really like to hone in on one candidate. That's great. There needs that support. There's handlers, there's pre-people. So really find out what it is that you want to do and the impact. And this actually leads into the day-to-day. My day-to-day is this. So much this. And what I mean by that is I'm on calls. There's a social media presence that we have to support, for at least for DMO, to support our council people, and especially with infrastructure, letting know every dollar that city council people are putting into the street from infrastructure is going to be huge in 2022. Right? That's going to be the game changer for us if we can have city councils, legislatures, governors, and members of Congress filling potholes, fixing bridges, doing those things, making sure you're at least starting to get the charging station set up, right? Those things are going to help us win. That's one of the ways, when someone asked earlier how we all work together, that's one way we all work together, right? So my day-to-day is a lot on the phone. It is a lot on videos. It is a lot of coffees. It is a lot of meetings. And one of the things I have to do for my stress level, or for my life, because I just don't want to be I get when I was getting started working 18-hour days on campaigns. One, First of all, none of you guys have to cut turf and scan it in like we used to with a little gun. You guys all have the minivan, so there's no reason any of you should be scanning data till 1 o'clock in the morning so you can cut turf to the next day. Let's just go ahead and start there, okay? And if you are, Mansour, we got to talk to these people. We got to help these people. If you're scanning data till 3 a.m., let's talk. We can help you with that, okay? But I got to get away. So I actually, one of the things I've been working is I create strategizing and thinking and planning time into my day. I block off chunks of 2 or 3 hours where like I'm busy. What is it? I don't know. I may go for a walk. I may play golf. Who knows what I'm doing? And then I got to sit down and draft it. So I think that that's part of my day is also organizing time, because if you don't, you end up just responding to things. And guess what? That means we're just doing from the same old playbook that everybody does every year. And we're not developing and innovating and creating. I don't know if I'll create something innovative that's going to be a game changer. But if I don't sit down and put that effort into it, the same way I write a field plan, the same way I write a comms plan, the same way I write a strategy plan, if I don't sit down and write the creative part of innovation and allow the creative time, it's never going to get done. So that is something that took me a long time to learn, everybody. And I encourage you, put in blank chunks of time where you say, I'm not going to respond to emails. I'm not on a call. I'm strategizing. I'm innovating. I'm thinking. And I will say, if that's all you do and you don't produce anything or any outlines or any one pagers, it's going to look like you're not doing anything at work. So you have to be able to produce one pagers and show it. Not everyone's going to agree all the time, but that might kick it to somebody else who has another idea, who kicks it to another idea. So I think that's my day to day, and where I would say, and the final thing is, don't be afraid. Look, I get it, but here's the one thing that no one ever told me about election season. Do you know what happens Wednesday after Election Day? Another election starts. It's a reality. It's another election somewhere starts. So I encourage you to know that winning, losing is important, but it's not end all be all, because there's another election that's starting the next day.
Thanks, Alejandro. I think, Gabrielle, I'm going to let you sort of dive into some of the DLCC sort of day to day. Actually, the one question I'd love for you to be able to also sort of address, because I know at least at the DNC, we work very closely with the state parties, and state parties are a huge part of our partnership and part of the reason why we're successful, both on election years and off years. We'd love for you to be able to speak to not only your day-to-day with the DLCC, but also sort of the work that you do with local entities and the state parties in particular.
For sure. Yeah. So a good amount of the work, I'm going to come from a communications lens, everyone. So from my end, a good amount of my work is twofold. So we're working with the state parties, as we call them, caucuses. So we're working with the various caucuses that we are they're either our targets. They might be our power building, so we might want to build up power in that space. We might not have the majority in that house, and that's in that particular state, but we can see a path forward. So we're trying to help build, and that'll be something that we tick off over time. And so that's one half of it. And then the second part would be understanding the organization and what we need to do as an organization and how we should communicate about those things. So from my perspective, I also wanted, I'll say this. When I joined the DLCC, I noticed that we had our rapid response on lock, right? So something crazy happened. Some Republican did something crazy. And so we were on it, right? But one of the things that we needed to really strengthen is how do we proactively talk about what we want to talk about, right? And so I saw somebody asking here about messaging. One of the things that I think all of the committees would venture to say is proactively talking about what our accomplishments. As Democrats, we can tend to be really humble, and we're like, oh, you guys know what we're doing for you, and then it's people like myself who come in and say, no, I know you know, but I'm gonna make sure you know that we are doing A, B, and C. Oh, we did this. Yes, we did X. Of course we did. You didn't know? Let me tell you what that means for you, how that's going to interact with you. So my day-to-day looks like making sure that folks understand from the organization part what the DLCC is, how the DLCC is helping our state legislatives articulate those things, but then also helping the caucuses, the actual legislators, helping them build out their communication strategies and pushing that information out. So many of the panelists here, I'm in a lot of meetings in the morning, but I do also make sure that I block out time to strategize. So I strategize for myself just so that I can have a understanding of what I think we should do moving forward. I also block out time to talk to my principals so that I can understand what they're hearing from their day-to-day conversations. And then I block out time to talk with my team to hear about what they're hearing from the caucuses and hearing what they're hearing from gather in what they're hearing on the ground so that we can adjust our communication strategy to be reflective of the needs of the people that we're trying to persuade or that we're trying to talk to. So I guess from the start to the bottom, we'll wake up and then we'll look at clips. So I want to see what's happening in the news, right? So like what's on the news cycle right now? Thanks to President Trump, former President Trump, the news cycle moves even quicker than it did before he came into the office, in my personal opinion. And so I want to make sure and see what is in the news cycle, what topics are really resonating with the anchors and in the major networks so that we can understand. And then I take that information and try to figure out, okay, how can I intersect the state legislators that I'm working with? So, I know, for example, Texas. I know that Texas is on its way to DC because they're trying to boycott this horrendous voting rights legislation that's moving through Texas. I know the Democrats are moving on their way. How can I help them build upon their trip so that it's not and even if we can't get the legislative win, message wise on the narrative, how can the people back home and then elsewhere know that, hey, this isn't right, or this is, and from my perspective, this isn't right. And this is what we propose, and this is how we're fighting to make sure that all votes are accounted for. So that's one thing. And then from there, I go into just helping our caucuses. Sometimes it requires us to actually walk them through a strategy and walk them through some of the releases and bounce ideas, create like a really safe space for brainstorming and have a good back and forth about, okay, so this is the idea that you have. All right, well, here's how one reporter might break that down, and they might try to poke holes through your story. Here, how can you strengthen your stance and so that not only the press understand that this is valid, but then the constituents that you're trying to talk to, right? So how do you take that information and make it strengthen it for both parties? And then lastly, I would say my day-to-day is figuring out how do we take a lot of this technical information that's coming from the policy wonks and then make it digestible for people who may casually follow politics, right? So we got to remember that there's people who may not follow CNN on Twitter. They might just see it as a pass on Instagram or something like that. So how do we take that information that we're getting from our policy folks who are down in the weeds and know Section A of Law C or whatever, how do we take that information and make it digestible for the everyday person who still cares about what's happening on the state level, who cares about what's happening on the congressional level and the national level, but they just may not fully understand that. So that's, I would say, a good chunk of my day at the DLCC.
That was awesome. Yeah, that was a masterclass. I have rarely hear people be able to articulate their day-to-day in our space. That was
and I was gonna say, I'm sorry if I can tend to be long-winded. So I was trying to be, I'm like in my head, be concise.
No, you did great. Well, I mean, your profession, your expertise is communication, so you definitely nailed that. So thank you. We've got 10 more minutes remaining here, but I want to be mindful of any questions that folks have. And I know, Carlos, you're going to hand it over to you here in a second to tell us a little bit more about the D trip and day-to-day there. But if folks have questions, they should drop it into the chat. We'll try to address it as we sort of do one last set of questions here and try to sprinkle in some some thoughts on the responses to those questions. But throw it to Carlos.
Thank you. Yeah, so I mean, I like to say, there's no such thing as like a typical day to day, but there's the meeting factor that both Gabriel and Alejandro referenced. You're on calls a lot, especially the higher up you move in the committee, the more they want you to be in meetings and calls. So sometimes I wonder if I should have accepted the promotion, but 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 really for me, what my job is and what I'm very excited about at the D Trip we did this cycle is we've expanded our DEI team. Now, last cycle it was just me and my supervisor, the Chief Diversity Officer, Tasha Cole. Now we've expanded it. There's 2 more members of our team. So we are able to enter into more buckets. So I personally am very involved in monitoring the hiring process, which we completely revamped this cycle to make it more equitable and inclusive. And so I'm checking to make sure that job descriptions are inclusive and will help attract a wide variety of folks, not just the same ones we constantly get every single time. That we're making sure that interview questions are inclusive, that we're checking for cultural competency as well as a commitment to DEI in addition to their capabilities, that I'm helping review resumes and looking at them for transferable skills as well, trying to make sure that folks understand. And I'm also helping bring this knowledge to those who are making hiring decisions. We're introducing trainings that introduce DEI concepts, to everyone. We have specific trainings, even ones about mitigating bias in the hiring process. I'm helping introduce those to the staff. And then we're also helping get involved in how we externally look at diversity, equity, inclusion. How are we communicating with, speaking to the comms section? We work with comms on what is the message to underserved communities of color, the disability community, the LGBTQ community. We have senior engagement advisors for specific communities of color that we know are going to be major communities you have to connect with. So working with them to make sure that the plans are sound, that we're helping hire vendors that know what they're doing. So my day-to-day is just kind of making sure that all of these pieces fall into place, that we're working with members because we're an incumbent protection organization, at first and foremost, so that we're working with them to make sure that every member is prepared. We obviously have our frontline members and the races we're most concerned with, but I'll help, figure out how are we also talking to general Congressional Hispanic Caucus, Congressional Black Caucus, and Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, dealing with those caucuses and working with them. So there's no typical day-to-day, but those are just some of the main projects that float through, my usual kind of project stream that we're doing, because now we have a new project management system. So there's also that. So working on getting through all that, but that's kind of a short, succinct way of saying of kind of what I have my hands in here at the DCCC.
Yeah, thank you, Carlos. So sounds like you have a lot of influence on the hiring. So for folks in the audience, you should take note of Carlos there in particular. And I misspoke earlier. I apologize. I shortened up our time, but in fact we're going to go to the 6:30 mark. So, but if you do have any questions, you should put them in the chat. One actually a topic that looks like it rose in the chat here during the past few minutes has been around folks that are sort of mid-career changes and folks that are looking to get involved with both organizing and campaign work in committees. And I wanted to see what some of the thoughts that our panel here had on that topic, and sort of what advice they would provide. I'll say it on my end, and on the DNC side, my day to day, at least on the very least on the DNC side, is changes, and I pivot from being an organizer to helping provide a lot of analysis and materials where available on elections to the White House and work very closely with the White House political team on a number of products and output, helping support and amplify the president's Build Back Better agenda and the bipartisan infrastructure law, which are all significant pieces of legislation and material and content that will help support not only Democrats, but everyday Americans who are the foundation of our democracy. And so if I could have the talent and skill like Gabrielle, Carlos, and Alejandro to articulate my day to day, I certainly I think it would be a very long sort of monologue that I produce here. But fundamentally, I do 3 buckets of work: organizing, a lot of writing, a lot of reading, and then I'll engaging and communicating. And so, I leverage a lot of my experience as an organizer, political organizer, every minute of the time that I spend working for the DNC. And so, all those micro experiences that I had were foundational. I wanted to pivot back to the question around folks that are sort of mid-level careers who had sort of past experiences or experiences in different industries, and are looking to sort of engage and get involved and transfer over, transition over, and would love to see what advice that you all would provide. Can I throw it to Alejandro first? Is that okay?
Oh, yeah, appreciate it. So, I think, look, one is your skills are transferable. And what I mean by that is I just tell people all the time, whenever you have an event, you've done an event before. You just maybe threw a party in high school or you threw a birthday party, right? You didn't just, I'm having a party and people show up. No, you have to, where you're going to have it. Okay, who you're going to invite. Did you call them? Did you send them a text? Great. The day before, day of, if you want people to show up, did you call? Like, you do that for a birthday party. You do that for a wedding party. You do it for, so I would say that if you've had different careers, that you actually are very fit for this. If you're a communications person, which I saw somebody mention that I think they were a reporter and a professor, being in the field, I mean, you're a great communicator. That's exactly where you're going to be. I think it's maybe building the experience so that way you can find out exactly how it transfers is the key. But I think all your skills that you have are transferable. And what we do is there is no specialty for it. It's something that you do in every day in your life, right? You talk to people, you plan parties, you think of new ideas and how they could work out, how to pay for stuff, right? To pay for the cheapest thing, right? But you want to get a good product. That's part of my job too, finding vendors who are democratically responsible and aren't going to rip off people, right? So I think that it's all transferable. It's about the experience to learn where. And then the other thing about even applying and anything, look, I've said this before, you've heard me say this, I'm about believing being bold. If you're not going to be bold and you're not going to try things and take a risk at your resume, or I'm more of I think of it more as the interview for me. But in the resume and your cover letter, that maybe if you're a strong writer, maybe that's where you do it. I'm not the strongest writer, so mine is more communicating verbally. Be bold. The 2 things I'll give you an example for myself is one, look, I don't use the term African American very much or the term Latinx. I use the term black and brown because black is beautiful and brown is beautiful as far as I'm concerned. So that's why I use them. Now, a lot of people can't, but to a lot of people, that's bold that I do that. And you know what? I will defend it. Black is beautiful. Brown is beautiful. Those are why I use those terms. The other thing is when I took this job, okay, so you heard me mention I worked for a lot of progressive groups, super progressive. And one of the questions I was asked was, Alejandro, you've worked with a lot of progressive groups and not everybody in municipal elections is progressive. Someone in a small town in rural Nebraska is not going to be the same as a city council person in New York. How do you close that gap with our board and get things done? My exact answer is we win elections. And I believe that. We have to win elections. Those groups I mentioned and progressive groups, they're great. Don't get me wrong. They have their role. But they're about pushing forward a progressive idea or a specific issue. Our job here at the party is to win elections. Not just win elections, but win them for Democrats. That is our job, the Democratic municipal officials. Democratic Congressional, Democratic Legislative. And there is a thing about that that's important, and being bold and saying, yes, I'm here to win. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not at all cost. There's times where you'll do everything you can and you just didn't win an election. The numbers weren't there. The Democratic performance was a little index was a little less than you thought. They raised more money. There's a lot of obstacles and different variables. But we all go and saying we are going to elect a Democrat to this seat. And I think being bold in doing that with the party is huge, and letting people know that you're not here to just get the next level. You're not just trying to be another field person so that way you can find out how you fit and then go work for Carlos or Gabriel or Mansour somewhere. You're here to win elections for Democrats, and that will ultimately help you get where you're going the most, because people win. Congressman Ruben Gallego, we actually won a city council race together. Then we ran his legislative race together. And then when he ran for Congress, I was with a different organization, but we helped him, and we ran his congressional race together. And so there are many cases like that. I have a variety of people, from Veronica Escobar, who we helped draft, right, to huge slew of people, to Joe Nagis, who nobody knew about when DFA endorsed him. And I found him because a buddy happened to run into him, and he said he was running, and we had a great conversation. So I think being bold and taking that stance in your resume when you present is the best way to get here. And not only that, but to do what you want to do, which is win elections for Democrats.
I would just piggyback on that and just and agree. For a year and some change, I left the Hill and went to go. I call it giving back to my hometown. I'm from Maryland, and so I'm here in Maryland. And so I went to go work for the school system that I went to public schools. I'm proud to say, and I went to go work for the very school system that I graduated from. It's the second largest school system in the state of Maryland. And so when I went for that job, leaving politics, I'm like, how does this transfer? I mean, you work in politics, Gabrielle. You were up here talking to members of Congress and passing laws. How does that work? And then I had to explain to them about to Alejandro's point, being bold, and then showing that the connection between. I also worked for Congressman Bobby Scott, who is the chair of the Education and Workforce. And so I know about education. I know about the different levels of education, and I can take that larger information that I have and break it down and apply it to this local level. So I would just jump in really quickly just to say, and to piggyback on that and say, yes, it's about being bold, but also it's about showing the job or whatever position you're going for. They may not see it, but if you can be able to connect the dots, it's about connecting the dots. So for that person who was a reporter, there's plenty of reporters who then become communications directors or work in the communication space because you were once on the opposite side. You were once that person who understood, who was writing the stories, and knew from your work experience of being in the newsroom and at the assignment desks and things like that, what an editor might be looking for. So then when you flip to the other side of comms, it might be a little easier for you to make those pitches, to say, I have the hooks. I can understand how the news cycle works and things like that. So I'll just add that in there.
Yeah, thank you, Gabrielle. Carlos.
Yeah, so I definitely, both of those points are really, really great points. Be bold, know what you want to do, communicate what you want to do. I think one of the things that I've learned, especially sitting on the hiring process for so much, in this world, in this industry particularly, hiring has to happen so quickly because campaigns move so quickly. So you have to, people aren't reviewing as much as you think they're reviewing. Like if you write a really nice cover letter, the odds of it being read is like 50%. So it's really about like your resume. And like look at what they put in the job description. I know this is kind of like a little like tactical and stuff, but honestly, it'll help you because people are just scanning stuff and they're looking for specific things. And to Alejandro's point, your skills are transferable. You just have to know how to make it sound like what you did is exactly what they're looking for, because it is what usually they're looking for. It just might have been worded differently than how you normally think of it. So, think of how you can recreate and reword what it is you've done, because you've done the work, you've done this before in whatever industry or industries you've worked in before. And you can have that, and it'll stand out when people are scanning through these things. And I know it's kind of like a tired thing, but networking, and I don't mean that in like a transactional sense. I know people hear networking and they think it's just transactional conversations, or I'm just meeting with this person just because they're going to advance my career. You're making genuine connections when you're working on in campaigns. You're working with people constantly. They're getting to know you, you're getting to know them. And in that spirit of being bold, you're hopefully trying to stand out with the work you're doing. You're stepping up. People are going to know that you've done a lot of good hard work, and you can use those connections to ask them, hey, have you heard of what's going on, or do you know this person in this office, do you know this person here, like what is your connection to that? But do it in a friendly way. You're not like just doing it transactionally. You genuinely know these people, and there's going to come a time, trust me, when on the other side they're going to come to you and ask you the same question. So honestly, just lean into the people that you get to know while you're working in these campaigns on the ground, as you move up into committees or to larger campaigns, whatever that may be. Because these decisions happen so quickly, it's you don't really have the luxury of like with a corporate job where you're really kind of taking your time to make your resume fancy, and you're getting all of these different interviews, and they're going to check the references, and it's going to be these things move rapidly, and so you kind of want to stand out and make sure that you're kind of getting in front of things, and that you're treating yourself kind of like the candidate you normally would organize for. You're organizing for yourself.
Thank you, Carlos. So we got a few minutes here to wrap up. I do want to ask one final question as a sort of to close everything out. James Henry, who's here in the chat. Yes, be bold. Yeah, you definitely reach out. Let's have a conversation. And in that spirit, that goes to the spirit of the last question that's what closes out, which is, if you had one piece of advice, or what would be the advice that you would give to the audience that's looking to pursue a career at a party committee? And I'm just going to just go ahead and start. And I would say, actually, this is my advice to anybody outside looking for a career, even whether it's party committee or whatever profession that they sort of are interested in. I think the number one thing to do is to go talk to people. Just go talk to people that are in that profession. Go talk to us, right? Reach out to us, have a coffee, learn about our stories, ask questions about our story, how things moved along in the process, learn, ask questions. And I think through that process, you're going to find clarity, you're going to find meaning, you're going to find truth. Whether it's the truth of how to get to the party committee, how to be able to get to work for a presidential campaign, how to work for a coordinated operation, how to work for the DNC, how to work for potentially the administration in the White House, you will be able to find that truth. So to my advice, and this goes for anybody, if you want to be a baseball player, go talk to athletes, go talk to people that play baseball and understand what the process is. If you want to work for the party committee, try to reach out and talk to people that work for the party, the committees themselves. I'm going to throw it to Gabrielle, and we'll go Gabrielle, Carlos, and Alejandro to close it out, if that's okay.
All right, sure. So I will make a quick plug because our operations department would kill me if I didn't. We are actually hiring at the DLCC, so I would encourage all of you who are listening to please go to dlcc.org, click on careers, and we have a lot of positions available because we are staffing up and getting ready for the elections next year. But with that, I would also say, for me, again, ditto. I would say having those informational coffees, information interviews are how they are also characterized, with people who are in spaces that you want to be in or you think you might want to make that move to, so that you can, my friends and I call them pick up gems and those little nuggets from those people, and then understand. And then I would say build your experience around that track, or figure out, as Alejandro was saying, how your skills are transferable so that you can then build your experience to make yourself more marketable. And then lastly, I would say apply. You got, not to say slang, but you have to shoot your shot. So you have to try and apply for positions. And then and I say that because each position, whether you get it or not, especially if you don't get it, you are able to get feedback from that place, get feedback from that person who you were interviewing with, learn from that experience, and then apply it for the next one. And so then when that door, that opportunity door opens for you, you're ready to smooth walk right through it. So those would be the things that I would say. And those are the steps that I personally took for myself. When I realized that I didn't want to do policy work and I didn't want to be a legislative assistant and I didn't want to write bills anymore, I started having conversations with people who were already in the communication space. And then I started figuring out, okay, how can I transfer my skills? What pieces from this conversation that I just took, what skill sets do I not have? How can I go get those? Does that mean I need to go to school, or maybe I get a certificate or take a class or a training, something like that, so that you can then, like Carlos was saying, add that to your resume, because if you write it in your cover letter, that might not be a thing. You might want to add that to your resume, and then so that it'll be shown on your paperwork when you get to the final step, which is apply. Just apply.
All right, I will also plug our jobs page. It is dccc.org/jobs. That is where we always post our jobs. We also have links for campaign jobs. We don't directly hire for a lot of our campaign jobs. We are technically just recommending to campaigns, but a lot of our campaigns have worked with us very closely. So if you're looking for campaign jobs, they're on there. There are also some DC HQ jobs that are on there. So just check that out. That is where we are always posting it. We're poised to hire more than we've ever hired at the D trip. We're already hired more than we have at this point. It's going to be crazy. We have a lot of job opportunities, so please check that out. And my advice would be kind of piggybacking a little bit off of Mansoor there, but expanding is do your research on the committee and wanting to come here. That means, if you can, talking to people who work there now or people who have left, find out maybe why they left, and if it's something that you would overcome, or if it was a good reason that they left, and that's a good thing. Talk to the people who are there now, but also look into it online when you're going to do an interview with someone. Definitely research their background, get to know them a little bit before you meet them, so that way you'll definitely stand out, because you'll be able to impress that you were paying attention to what's going on. So just do a little bit of research and to reiterate, be bold, and that would be all of my advice. And apply. Like what Gabrielle said, always apply, because I know that is another thing, is some people think that maybe there's one thing or two things that maybe they're not qualified for, or whatever that's in the qualifications. Also realize that those qualifications are not hard and fast, and most people are willing to waive one or two things. So always, if you think that it's something you want to do, shoot your shot, because you never know what you're going to get.
Yeah, and we are municipalities, so we don't have a lot going on right now. But when in the year we will be hiring, we'll share that with DNC and the other groups so they can get it out. The things I'll close with are, yes, what everyone else said. The things I'll close with is, look, there is a lot of heartbreak. I'm not going to lie to you. You will not get a job that you apply for. It's okay. There will be another one you will get. Your candidate will lose. Your favorite candidate will lose. Great. A candidate you love will win. A lot of ups and downs in this business. A lot. Try not to take it too hard. If you apply for a job and it doesn't work out, it's okay. There's many more opportunities across the country. And so what I'll leave you with is the best piece of advice I can give you. And that is that you belong in this space. Your organizing is valuable and important, and I believe in you. That's it.
Thank you, Alejandro, and thank you all for joining us today. I will have to make one last plug here. Campaign Readiness Project, dnc.org, is where you'll be able to find a lot of opportunities with the DNC and upcoming elections, particularly as we get ready for upcoming elections. So you can go that one more time, Campaign Readiness Project at the DNC. Thank you so much to our panel. Thank you for the host here. It was great to be able to moderate everybody. You can find us definitely on Twitter, and I think everyone has our contact information. Thank you again to our panelists, and talk to you soon. Bye.